Good afternoon. My name's Stephen Hunley, and today we're here for two reasons. This is the first part of a three-part video series that may be expanded later, but for now it's just three parts. And we're going to be doing two things. We're going to be, one, discussing recent articles put out in the last 10 years by academics discussing use of the first and second person, predominantly the first person, in academic writing. And these are academics from a variety of fields, and we'll cover that later. That's one half of what we're doing, and then we are also going to be learning how to do some low-level woodworking. We'll call it whittling. Today we're going to be whittling, or beginning to whittle, what's called a wood spirit. So that's one of them, and if you pause the video and Google wood spirit, you'll see that the people who really do this are much better than me. But it's not that hard to do, and I think I can definitely get you started on knowing how to do it, and maybe give some general whittling tips if whittling is something you're new to. I'm relatively new to it myself. The first academic and article we'll be discussing today is by a Dr. Christine Webb, and she's from the Department of Nursing at Manchester University in Manchester, England. So I thought that was a fun choice. Typically, this is for a composition theory course, and I'm a master's student in English. But we have to remember that rhetoric and language and writing is something that is the most intersectional, thing that there could be. Right? Everyone writes. Everyone, everywhere, in every discipline. So I was excited to see a non-English academic write on the use of first person in academic writing. And in fact, her article is titled "The Use of First Person in Academic Writing, Objectivity, Language, and Gatekeeping." So pretty much right on the nose with what we're talking about. And Dr. Webb is she's a nurse. She has a bevy of degrees, or like that many, or it's like her name and then that many abbreviations for all her degrees. So a very learned woman, and with a very broad base of knowledge. And Dr. Webb noticed that with her nursing students, they were not able to get published when they were using qualitative data, which is anything not having to do with numbers, and they were speaking in the first person, and typically they wouldn't get published. And she was saying, well, why is this? And I guess kind of took issue with it, and she kind of posits this defense of the first person for qualitative and quantitative writing in hard sciences. And she kind of does it from an interesting take. She spends a lot of time in her article kind of attacking the inherent goodness or objectivity of third person, and says that third person, it's deceiving you if you think it's objective, because all writing is done by human beings, and scientists are human beings. The work of science is done by humans, and if they're writing in third person or they're writing in first person, there's always going to be a human element in that work, and it's just really a matter of, are you utilizing it or not? And first person does, and third person not always. So we'll come back to that in a second. Let's talk about our project. So, to make your wood spirit, you're going to start with just a normal piece of wood. Something like that. It's really helpful it has a corner. So, we're kind of working like that, right? If it has a corner and edge like this, that's what you want. So, all you're really going to want to do is clean up a piece of wood as best you can. I'm using just this beat up old pocket knife I've had forever. It's nothing fancy. The tip is broken off it. The most important thing with your knife is that it's sharp, that you keep it sharp, and that you're comfortable with it. And we'll talk a little bit more about whittling technique and safety later, perhaps. But the first thing we're going to be doing as we begin this project is making two drop cuts. Now, a drop cut, you're going to take the knife and you're going to make two hard horizontal cuts laterally here across the wood. And you're going to make two cuts, one high, one low. That would give yourself a little more space in between the cuts than you think, because what you're going to be doing when you do these is you're forming where the nose will end, and where the nose will end on this side. So where will the eyebrow, eye cavity line be, and where will this nose end? We're going to have to dig out all of this area right there. So, and if you'd like to do a lady wood spirit, or I did Santa Claus once when I was bored, so you can really make it your own. But it does kind of avail itself to the beard, and you know that can be tough for ladies sometimes. You should try to make a lady wood spirit, but maybe you can make it like braids or some such. So that's where we'll pick up, and I'm just going to go ahead and start making my drop cuts while I'm talking to you. Back to Dr. Webb. See if I can do this and not cut my hands off at the same time. Quick safety, you always want to keep the knife going away from your hand. I'll say that, and I'll be bleeding on the camera 2 seconds later. So Dr. Webb brings the point that science is not objective. It's done by people, and whether those people are, feel like they are enabled and allowed to write in the first person or not, their perceptions and personalities and what they've read, what they've researched, what they're expecting to find, that's always going to shade what they actually write, no matter what the perspective they write it in is going to be. And she challenges people who don't believe her in that to consider how DNA was discovered, and it's this long, sordid, crazy tale of a lot of people. And she kind of outlines it in her article, and I'll link it below this video. But suffice it to say that a lot of this, takes the form of personal narrative, and it wasn't just math and hard science all the way through. There's a definite human element and a language element to communicating and sharing information, which is what science is all about. And she says that the first person can relay that more accurately and possibly more objectively, given, I don't know, more honestly, let's say that, more honestly. And that seems to be kind of the stance that Dr. Webb takes. She says that the real challenge kind of comes when we're deciding how we're going to judge these qualitative first-person works. And she says we can judge them based on credibility, which is where we kind of assume that the scientist is going to be sort of the subject of their own experiment in this, right? They're kind of assessing themselves. And so that puts a lot of pressure on the scientist. And the other way, or the writer, the other way we can assess first-person works effectively, she says, is by dependability, which just requires almost a contract of honesty between the writer and the reader, where the writer is, logging their thoughts and micro-emotions and just being as honest as they can be as they're going through recording this information, this data, because what they want to do is produce an accurate portrayal of the things they experienced and their own perspective as they underwent this experiment or this project or this research assignment. I think this definitely crosses lines between courses and contents and disciplines. So to sum up, Dr. Christine Webb very pointedly thinks that nursing students in particular, but all students, should be empowered to use first person because the myth that third person is this objective, pure light of reason is just that, a myth, because it's being written by people, and people are inherently subjective. And you can't avoid that, but you can embrace it and use it effectively. When we come back in video 2, I'll progress this nose a little further, and we'll begin discussing the next steps in our wood spirit, and we'll also speak on another academic.